Our keynote now to get us up to morning tea, after which we take on our parallel streams. And don't forget, we come back here this afternoon to wrap up the conference with our speed debate. We talked about zero trust during that session. Let's dive a little bit deeper with the Chief Technology Officer, Australia New Zealand at Palo Alto Networks, one of our platinum sponsors. This guy is a zero trust subject matter expert and evangelist across APAC. Please welcome Ricardo Galbiati, Security Operations Centre of the Future, to the stage.
Thank you very much. Let me open my stuff over here. Hopefully it will all work. Welcome, good morning. Thank you very much for joining my session today. As you've heard, my name is Ricardo Galbiati. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Australia and New Zealand at Palo Alto Networks. And today I won't talk about zero trust, which is interesting because I've had a few people telling me, oh, a zero trust presentation is coming up. Not quite. I'm going to talk about the Security Operations Center of the future. But before we get there, I need to really touch on where do operations centers come from in the first place? Well, it might be surprising to hear, but history teaches us that operations centers in their most general purpose form have been around for over 5,000 years, give or take. And they normally appear when leaders realize that a small team has not enough capacity to execute tasks when an organization grows in terms of size of people or number of functions. And so they create these centers to effectively manage the workflow and the actions and coordinate the teams that need to deliver on them. But one important thing is absolutely necessary for a successful operations center, and that is aligning to the business mission. And one great example I have of that is the Apollo Mission Control System operations center that we have seen in many movies and TV shows. And you can tell how efficiently it coordinated teams with the single purpose of being able to send people to the moon and bringing them back safely. And that took quite an effort, but it was clear to whoever was working in there what the mission of the organization was. So if we apply that concept to cybersecurity, because at the end of the day, we're talking about the Security Operations Center here, what would be the mission of cybersecurity? And actually, I like to call that, what would be the first principle of cybersecurity? I've recently started exploring the concept of applying first principle thinking to cybersecurity because I find it very powerful. First principles are those foundational blocks of knowledge that help you simplify problems and start again with fresh strategies. So if we were to define the first principle of cybersecurity in an organization, what would be a good definition? Well, I found this one from an ex-colleague of mine. His name is Ricardo. He used to work as a CSO at Palo Alto Networks. And he's actually written a book about first principles in cybersecurity. And he said, reducing the probability of material impact to my organization due to a cyber event is the first principle of cybersecurity. And I really like this definition because, first of all, it focuses on probability. It's not aiming at foolish perfection. Nothing is 100% security proof, but also it ties in very well when attacks are targeting something that is material to the organization, something that we need the organization to continue to operate, and focuses on that. Now, I can't claim this quote to myself. As I said, it's from Rick, but I came up with a very simplified version, and I'm happy to take feedback on that later on. What about keeping business in spite of cyber attacks, right? If a cybersecurity program is able to keep us running, regardless of how many attacks we are thrown at, then we're doing a pretty good job. Now, if we start with this statement, mission statement, and we want to figure out what the Security Operations Center should work within that mission, I think a good way of start is the SOC, or Security Operations Center, should aggregate and analyze signals, prioritize response, and at the same time coordinate the execution of security tasks. And I'll break it down into those highlighted words. First of all, aggregation. There's a lot of information going around in cybersecurity tools and processes, and we need to centralize it. So the SOC needs to be that central point of control. But then we need to be able to distinguish between what's important and what's not, so the signal from the noise. Because with the signal, we can do something. With the noise, we're just going to slow down. Then we need to prioritize. Prioritize goes straight to the point of the previous mission statement, which is what is actually causing material impact to the organization. Should we chase every single attack, or should we prioritize the ones that are most impactful? And once we figure out that we are under attack, that we have to do something, well, we need to coordinate the response and execute it, run it, make change, intervene effectively. But is that how Security Operations Center works today? Not quite. Unfortunately, the Security Operations Center of the present is mostly focusing on monitoring. Yes, it becomes that centralized point of aggregation for the majority of signals and noise at the same time, but it hardly has the ability to intervene. And it gets normally overwhelmed because the number of tools that are sending signals and noise at the same time to the operations centers is spanning in the range of 76 on average. 76 tools per organizations are producing logs and telemetry that is sent to the SOC. And that generates over 11,000 alerts per day and causes the end result to be that we're sitting on existing attacks and compromises for over 200 days. And then once we figure out that something was going on, we need another 70 to try and remediate that. Now, I don't know about you, but this doesn't look very promising in delivering that mission that we were discussing before. And you know, the interesting thing is that once we realize that we have been breached and an investigation is completed, maybe after those 270 plus days, we know exactly how it happened. We have all the information we needed to figure out where it started, where it went, what machines were compromised, what access was utilized to enter. But it took us so long. So why can we not do that in real time if the data is already there? Well, the reason for that is mostly related to how we handle the data in the first place. You see, all these tools, the 76 plus tools that generate the information, tend to operate in single silos and analyze that data on their own, and then reduce it or simplify it into what we call human-readable alerts, which means that there's a dashboard where a human is sitting at and receives inputs that he can understand in order to figure out if they are under attack. And even the SIEM, which is supposed to help with that, requires so much manual intervention in order for a particular correlation of events to trigger another alert and add it to the picture. You see that the current Security Operations Center is human-centric and is creating a choking point right there and then. And then the human figures out, yeah, the prioritization of the attacks. Are we really under attack? It enriches the information and then figures out what the remediation path is, and that's when maybe he uses automation to simplify the actions after. But these automations are very atomic. Change X here, isolate Y there. It's really coming after the fact. It's almost a crutch that helps the human that is currently at the center of the SOC. And how do we scale this? Well, having more people in the SOC, it's not working very well. And also they get very bored, if not burnt out, by the amount of work that they need to deliver. So we need to change. We need to change the approach to the SOC completely. And cybersecurity has gone through quite a bit of change in the last 20, 25 years. And yes, I do mention zero trust in this presentation. We went from securing the network based on perimeter approaches to zero trust, so doing security controls everywhere at the same time, in architectures like SASE or Secure Service Edge that are not perimeter focused. We moved the infrastructure from being on-premise and slow to deliver to dynamic and automatic in the cloud. On the endpoint, we don't secure anymore with antivirus, but we moved on to EDR or even better XDR. So being able to generate an entire behavioral baseline for how our endpoint devices are protected and generate forensics information out of it. But what about the SOC? We're still relying on humans and the SIEM as a technology, which originally was not even built for cybersecurity purposes. It was an event management system. So what we really need to do is revolutionize the security operation model. And I know that this sounds like a very marketing buzzword, but revolutionize really comes from Latin, which is revolvere, or turning around. And that's exactly what we should do. Turn around the pyramid of interaction in the SOC. Instead of hitting the analyst with alerts and having him do all the hard work and using automation at the end, we should hit the SOC right at the machine level. Have the machine sort out the majority of the workload, and only when needed, ask help for a human at the end of the process. Maybe when the machine gets stuck. But is that even possible? Yes, if we think about the SOC of the future as being machine-led and human-empowered, and this is how it's going to work. So every one of the silos should be broken. The data that is produced by all these tools should be reduced and, in normal SIEM terminology, stitched together. I'd like better the word fused together. Stitching sounds a lot of manual work still. While what we want is really being able to tell, for example, that if a machine or an endpoint or a user is accessing a cloud instance and is transited the network, the logs that I see on that machine and on the cloud combined to what I see in transit on the network are actually the same action. That will be able to tell me the exact story of how things have happened in real time. So consolidate that data and fuse it together in one place. And also enrich it with identity, with attack surface information. And once it's all in one place, and once we have built this puzzle, let the machines look at it. Let the machine analyze the picture that the puzzle is building and telling us, are we under attack? Is something happening to our critical assets? Is there a story here that I should point out? And if there is, why not automate the response? Straight away, if there's a task that can be done by a machine, it should be done by a machine straight away. Not waiting for a human to intervene or be involved. And then, as I said, if a machine gets stuck or if it needs authorization to make particular changes, yes, that's when the analyst, the human, gets involved at the end of the process. This is what the SOC of the future should look like. Can we do it? Well, look, at Palo Alto Networks, we have created this new terminology that we call XSIAM, or Extended Security Intelligent Automation Management System, another acronym for you to remember. And I could probably spend the rest of the presentation telling you about all the features of this offering, but instead I invite you to come over to our booth and see it in action. And what I'll talk about is how this has changed our SOC at Palo Alto Networks, because we've gone through the same journey that we're trying to promote within ourselves. So first of all, Palo Alto Networks runs a SOC. On our own, we don't outsource it. We have 10 FTEs, or full-time analysts, effectively spread across the world. And as you can see, we have a clear mission, which is a good starting point, going back to that mission statement. And we offer a few SOC services among threat hunting, monitoring, and incident response. At the bottom, you can see the scope of what we're trying to protect. Over 15,000 users, each one of them with their own device, plus many, many servers, and also data centers where we actually host services that we offer to our customers. So quite a large scope for 10 people to be able to run and protect. And how does it look like? It's quite simple. At the bottom, we have those layers that we call sensors and enforcement points. Some of them are from us. On the network, for example, we leverage our next generation firewall and the SASE solution, which is called Prisma Access, to see traffic in motion in between A and B, in between users and applications. But we have reached that with third-party informations like identification, multi-factor, email analysis, and even vulnerability scanning. We also have agents deployed on pretty much every user and server device. Those agents are Cortex XDR agents that produce that great baselining of information of what is happening on that machine at any given time. And on the cloud, we mix a bit of API querying for SaaS applications to analysis of code and posture management in cloud with data loss prevention engine unified across the board. So these are generating, as you can imagine, a lot of information, a lot of telemetry, and they're quite a reduction compared to the 76 plus products that we mentioned at the beginning as an average. And all this data gets ingested into XSIAM. It gets put there, it gets fused together so that we understand exactly and we're able to draw automatically the story of what happened from A to B when a user connected to a location. And from XSIAM, we can run the analytics straight in there. And if the analytics starts an automation workflow, at the moment, we operationalize that through XSOAR, which is the security operation and orchestration tool that is still separate, but we are merging with XSIAM in the near future, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation. Now, before I talk about what XSOAR actually does in there, let's look at what happens from the left. Because before we can protect ourselves, we need to understand ourselves. And that's the idea of using attack surface management to discover our current attack surface, and monitor it and include what we are already protecting and put it into the whole picture. So knowing ourselves through an attack surface management is critical to put context within what is being attacked. And at the same time, we need to know the adversary. If we know the modus operandi, the tactics and procedures, we can actually counter them in real time. So that alert enrichment all contributes into the picture of what we're seeing on the network, on the endpoint, on the cloud, to what we're seeing from an attacker perspective and what relates to our own assets. And this is where the magic happens. XOR in the middle tells us what can I automatically remediate without human intervention. And it pushes it down as security actions, automated changes of policy into the system. And if it happens to be when an analyst is actually out of business hours, he doesn't need to be woken up. Those 10 analysts actually have a shift that goes from 9 to 5, and they can sleep at night. But if there is an action that is required to involve a human, then we link it to pager duty, so someone gets a call because it has gone through all the possible automation and it has hit a roadblock now, and it needs human intervention. So quite simple in its mechanism. But what does it all mean in practice? What does it deliver? Well, these are actually statistics coming from our Security Operations Center. We, on average, process about 36 billion events on a daily basis, coming from all those log and telemetry sources, of which we fuse together and we analyze using machines about 133 potential incidents. 125 of those fully automated. No one is actually even looking at them. They get completed by playbooks from A to B by the machines on their own. And 8 of them require some manual intervention. So that's about a 94% success rate of automation at the moment. And all this is delivered with about 10 seconds of mean time to detect and 1 minute of mean time to respond. And the cost saving of this, meaning that we don't need 16 additional people to do boring tasks, repetitive tasks in the SOC. And the 10 people are sleeping at night, as I said before. So quite impressive. Now, I want to make it very clear. It's not as simple as you buy a box, you deploy it, and you get this outcome. It took us quite a bit of a journey to get there, to get rid of SIEM and legacy approaches to manual intervention to cybersecurity, to the Security Operations Center. So it took us about 1 month, first of all, to deploy the on-premise infrastructure required to do this, especially deploying agents everywhere, making sure that we centralize the collection of data in there. 2 to 3 months to onboard the logs of all the other tools, including third parties, and you can see a list of those there, because we need to put that entire context in order for the machine to understand. Remember, machines are very good when you have a lot of quality data, but they're not good if the context is missing. And then an additional 2 months, it was required to effectively decommission the SIEM, because we were running a SIEM as well, and migrate those 80 custom-built, manual-built correlation rules into XSIAM alert use cases. And now we are in the final process, in the last few months, of converting and importing all the XOR automations, that you remember that tool in the middle that does the automation, can become part of the XSIAM itself natively. So we're going through that journey right now. And we have proposed this to many customers. We launched this effectively in October last year, and we are now with over 20 running customers that have completely revolutionized their SOC, one of which is actually in Australia, a large financial institution. So the moral of the story is that if you're still wondering what the SOC of the future looks like, you'll probably realize that we have a problem with how we are running it today, and it's still leveraging analyst and human intervention at the center and automation as a help, while the SOC of the future is machine-led and human-empowered. But if you want to see it in action, as I mentioned, please come over to our booth, and we'll have plenty of demos to prove it. Thank you very much.